I am really looking forward to today's chat with Wren Rowland. And I've only met Wren the last couple of weeks, but she has very quickly become a very important person in my life. And Wren is a canine behaviourist, studying to be an animal behaviourist. And we have acquired a new fur baby in our family. We have adopted Boston. And we've had Boston for 4 weeks. And Boston, whilst he is absolutely beautiful, there are some behavioural challenges that Wren is helping our family with. So I'm so excited to talk with Wren today about what it means to be an animal behaviourist and also to compare some notes, because I've studied human behaviour for many, many years and I can already see some similarities there. So,
yeah.
Wren, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Lovely morning today, a bit overcast.
Yes, it's a bit overcast. And we were just comparing notes. Wren's house sitting and she has her dog, and you're also looking after another dog that you said is a bit miffed that you haven't taken it for a walk.
Yeah. We haven't gone out for a walk yet this morning, so he's a bit annoyed at me.
Yeah. So are your dogs sitting calmly? Yeah. Are yours sitting calmly?
Yeah, so Asta is currently fast asleep in her crate. Yes. And Caleb is, let's see whether I can, there's Caleb.
Oh, lovely. Sitting in the background.
He's just doing his own thing. He's an older dog, so
yes,
not quite as intense.
Because your Asta is a puppy, isn't she?
Yeah, she's only 9 months old.
Yes.
So
we could, during this podcast, there could be an emergency stop for both of us because Boston, I've set him up with some dog chews, but he doesn't seem that interested. So tell me, Wren, what is a canine behaviourist? What a canine behaviourist, animal behaviourist? What is that?
So the main thing that a canine behaviourist does, because I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Yep.
So we analyse canine behaviour. So we go into houses and sort of have a bit of a look around the environment, have a look at the dog, show some of the body language that they're displaying, and see whether we can't sort of help, not fix necessarily, because that's not always possible, but at least dampen some of the effects of things that have happened as a result of genetics or as a result of trauma in the past, and sort of help them out. So in a sense, we're a little bit like psychologists, but not quite, I think is probably the best way to describe us. In a more general sense, a behaviourist is someone who goes in and works with animals to improve their ability to work with humans, or at least be around humans. And everybody's expectation of animal behaviour is different. So, obviously in your sense, you want a dog that is calm and peaceful and, not quite so anxious.
Yes.
Whereas, another person who has a working breed that they want to use, they may need to decrease their dog's propensity towards nipping behaviours because they're nipping the sheep too much or something like that. Yeah. So it really depends, on the needs of the person. But ultimately, our job is to help the dog fit in better with the people's lifestyle and show people how to adjust their behaviour so that the dog can fit in more smoothly.
I can, and that's exactly why we have you. We've got Boston, and for those that may or may not have seen some of my social media, Boston is a Kerry Blue Terrier, so is an Irish working dog. He was bred as a sheep and cattle dog, or that's the breed, and also to chase rodents. Now, that is not what we do in our house.
It's fun to watch, though.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And we're Boston's third family. So the first family, my understanding is that he was born, I don't know if he was born on the farm, but he was on a farm, but he was kept in a pen. So he wasn't able to it just wasn't a stimulating environment. And then the next family had him, and my understanding is it was a loving family, but probably not really integrating him into the family. And then they moved out onto a farm, and that's where his cattle instinct, so he kept running away and chasing cattle. And we have adopted him, and probably not really understanding a lot about his behaviours. They said he was very well adjusted, mildly anxious in new settings. Holy hell, very anxious in new settings. And the thing I loved, Wren, when we got in contact with you, when you first came to our place, was you did assess, I saw you observing the environment and observing Boston, but you said, what are our goals? What do we want? And very much all of our dogs have been rescue dogs. And I have always said, when I die, I want to come back as one of my dogs, because they are the most spoilt things. So I sort of shared with you that it's about integrating him into our family life, and you were able to very quickly observe some behaviours with him. So just tying back to what you said, that you very much were about observation of how he interacted with us and how we interacted with him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important part, because if you're trying to go in and work with a dog but you have no idea how he interacts in his, I mean, even if it's not his normal environment because he's just come into it, but if you don't know how, you know, his behavior is in that environment where, you know, you're bringing him to a facility or something like that, then you don't get that sort of, I'm going to use a buzzword here, holistic experience, where you're sort of hitting all of the areas of possible pain, I suppose. So, you know, you're adjusting the environment around him. You might be putting barriers up if he barks a lot, or, you know, things like that. And so it's not just about training the dog or the people, it's also about assessing the environment that he's in.
Yes. And I also, what I observed of you observing him is that you picked up some very, very nuanced body language, because he's a furry. He was a furry dog and we couldn't even see his eyes, but you were able to observe things in his eyes that we couldn't even see. You know, the whale eye, eye. What's that?
So whale eye or moon eye. I prefer the term moon eye personally, but it's not quite as widely used. So the term whale eye basically refers to when a dog's eyes are open so wide that you can see the whites or the sclera really easily. And so it sort of takes the shape of a moon. Why it's called whale eye?
Maybe whales have big eyes.
Whales have huge eyes, and that's probably the best comparison that I can give you. But basically the idea is that a dog will show that when they are in a state of heightened stimulation, usually in conjunction with anxiety, sometimes when they're about to start playing with you, but usually the body language will sort of complement and tell you which one that is. Vast majority of the time, it's going to be anxiety related.
Yes, and we hadn't even, because we couldn't even see his eyes, and I guess that's from your professional observation, but you were able to sort of teach us that as well, which was great. And also picking up, that's just gone out of my head. Like he was panting a lot, like he was.
Yes, he was panting, he was pacing, his body language was very stiff and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Every time I started patting him, when we first started, his tail would stop wagging. He was tolerating the contact. He wasn't enjoying the contact, which is a really important distinction, because a lot of dogs are really patient and lovely, but they don't necessarily at that moment feel comfortable being patted. So they'll just sort of put up with it until it goes away. And I didn't want to have that sort of relationship with him to start off with. So that's when I started bringing in the consent test, where if he voluntarily made contact with me, then I'd give him a pat, and then I would stop after, 10 seconds or so and allow him to decide whether or not he wanted me to keep going. So that's a really important thing. When you've got a dog that's a bit uncertain about their new environment, or weird around people, it's really important to do a consent test and make sure that they're actually comfortable with you touching and approaching them.
Yeah, and that was something new for me, because I think I intuitively do that with other animals, but you just helping me to see that, and I can notice his consent now. He gets very, he's still a bit standoffish, so we've had him for a month now. There's times when he doesn't want to be around, and I respect that, and there's times when he gets quite snuggly, and it's that nuzzling in, which was, that was good, just to even understand more about what that body language is saying.
Dogs are autonomous beings. They're, our current understanding of dog psychology is that a fully grown dog has got the approximate IQ of a 2.5-year-old child. So basically, that is the age where a lot of mental development is happening in children. Yes. And if we sort of not transplant directly, but draw a lot of parallels between the child behavior and dog behavior, consent is really important at that age as well, because it forms that basis of, I have control over my own body.
Yes. Yes. That's really that's really cool. I love those links there as well. And one of the things that I've observed is a lot of you coming in and helping us with Boston is actually helping teach me as well. And something that I picked up and reflecting on it, and I guess this links with the human behaviour side of things, is I was unsure about, let me step back a little bit. So Boston is a beautiful, beautiful dog. He seems to be settling in well, but he has, I would say, that underlying sort of anxiety. But when we talked about it, when I leave, when he's left on his own, he goes into panic mode. So it's that sort of isolation anxiety, separation anxiety, I guess they call it, don't they?
So isolation anxiety is your overarching umbrella term, and that underneath it has separation anxiety as sort of a category. So isolation anxiety is the fear of being separated from something. Usually it's just people. But in certain circumstances, in separation anxiety, for example, it is the fear of being separated from a particular person. So even if there's other people around, they don't care. That one person is not there. They're panicking.
Yeah. And he's kind of showing a little bit of that, but also if he's on his own, goes into complete panic mode. And what I've learned from you is it's about understanding his kind of body language and what motivates him to help keep him stimulated. And that's one of the things we're finding a little bit tricky, because I think from his environment is the first family probably didn't have a lot of stimulation, and that's in that early developmental stages. And then I think the second family probably didn't have, they said he just didn't play and he kind of was a bit of a loner. So we're finding it a little bit tricky to find what motivates him, but that's the same in human people.
Absolutely.
People, what motivates them. If we understand what motivates them, it helps to for people to be more engaged.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's really tricky. So one of the funniest things that I've come across, and I think I talked about this in your session, was this video of an English bulldog. And this bulldog apparently didn't respond to any of our normal motivators. So no treats, no toys, no affection. He just didn't seem to be responding. And so the trainer sort of asked, is there anything that really motivates him? And the owner sort of thought about it for a moment and said, he really likes spatulas, as in the cooking implement. And so what they did was they bought a rubber spatula, and that was his reward. And suddenly his training just took off.
Oh my God, I'll have to get my, Boston probably hasn't seen the spatula because I don't do cooking stuff. So, but I might get the spatula out and see what he does with it.
What he does with it.
Yes. We haven't found
it's hilarious. And finding the dog's motivator helps them then to go, okay, if I do this, I am rewarded. And it becomes a really positive experience because, as I'm sure you probably know, emotive learning is much stronger and more easily retained than rote learning.
Yes, yes. And you see that a lot, don't you, with on the telly when they're training a lot of the drug dogs, and the reward is often just some random bit of fabric rolled up or something like that. But that's obviously they've associated that with it being their motivator. Them. Yeah, that's interesting to them.
When they were, so this is a little bit of a sad but kind of cute story.
Yeah.
So after 9/11, they were using the search and rescue dogs to look through the debris.
Yeah.
And these dogs were actually getting depressed because every person that they found was dead.
Oh.
And so what they would do is they would get people to hide in the rubble so that they could find them and find them alive and be rewarded for that.
Oh.
And it's
that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What did depressed dogs, actually, I think I know, but what were the signals of depressed dog?
It's very similar to the ones in humans. So lethargy, lack of appetite, disinterest in exciting or, interest in activities that they didn't, disinterest in activities that they previously were interested in, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's very, very similar. It's not very common.
No.
For me to come across a dog that's depressed. Usually it's anxiety.
Yeah, because you specialise in anxiety, don't you? And is it the aggression as
anxiety and aggression.
Yeah. So what is... Actually, before we go into that, how did you get into this? How did you become a canine behaviourist?
I faffed around a lot after year 12. I tried doing reception work for a little while, and at that time, not a good choice. And then I was in childcare for about 6 months. Not a good choice. I don't do well with kids, apparently, or at least other people's kids.
Okay.
So then I decided that I wanted to try studying political science and international relations.
Oh, yeah.
And I got really, really sick right beforehand. Oh. And so I was literally navigating the campus on crutches, and it didn't end well either. Yeah. I've lost most of the information that I got from that year of uni, except for all the stuff about linguistics, because I apparently really enjoyed that.
Interesting.
And then I tried studying IT. That didn't stick either. I'm not an office person.
Yeah.
And then I became a certified Auslan translator.
Did you? I did not know that. My mother-in-law and my father-in-law, who's passed away, they're profoundly deaf.
There you go.
Oh,
that's
so
awesome.
My husband's first language was sign language.
There you are. What is it, Auslan?
His is just they do use Auslan, but his is much more just how he talks to his mum. Like there's some kind of made up stuff, but yes, certainly understands.
Yeah, I think that's called home sign from memory.
Yeah. I'm very clunky. The kids and I are very clunky with it. So you became cool. I will plant that away for some reference. Thank you.
There you go. So I'm not an interpreter. So there is a difference between the two.
Yes.
I am not as qualified as an interpreter. Interpreters, you have to get your diploma of interpreting and diploma of Auslan. I'm not that qualified. But for a little while I did translate for deaf kids in primary schools.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Cool.
Unfortunately, I then discovered that I actually have an audio processing disorder. And so in lab environments, I can't prioritize noises. I can't block out noises.
Yes.
And so as a result, I had to unfortunately abandon that career path.
Oh.
But I can still, do the science. I'm a bit rusty now. So then I sort of was like, well, what do I do now? And it was actually my mum who said, hey, you're good with animals. Why don't you start working with dogs? And I was like, that's a good idea. And 4 years later, here I am. So
because you have your own business, don't you? You've got your business running. So we'll give a little plug, Bowtie Dog Training. We'll give people details of that at the end as well. But running your business, and you're the behaviourist in that business. You have other people who do some other training, but you're the canine behaviour.
I'm the person they call in when there's an issue.
Yeah. So getting back to what we were saying, so you primarily focus, I mean, you do a whole range of things, but around the anxiety and aggression. Yeah.
So most of the time when people call me in, it is because their dog has shown signs of some behavioural problem.
Yeah.
A lot of the times also I am called in for basic obedience stuff like puppy work and, training dogs that have been adopted and things like that. But most of the time when I'm called in, it is for some form of aggression or anxiety like behaviours. It's interesting to note. So this is something that people may not understand. Most of the time, aggression is anxiety.
I could understand that.
So we call it reactive anxiety, and it's very similar to how humans process sort of really severe fear, where they lash out. So that's that fight response. And so if you have a dog that is aggressive as a result of trauma or just as a result of something that's inbuilt as part of their genetics, which can happen sometimes, unfortunately. So, if you approach them too quickly, you move too quickly, then they can lash out as a result. I have come across 2 instances of true overt aggression in 4 years. And that is more than a lot of people will ever come across.
And the other stuff is that anxiety reacted. I can see that a lot, even with Boston. He doesn't show signs of aggression, but just that response to the anxiety is, the barking at the front window. And one of the things you showed us, which I thought was really cool, and it's really simple as well, is to acknowledge when he's barking, is to acknowledge him, to go down to the window, have a look, and then just kind of go, nothing there, and not make a deal about it. So it's not yelling at him and saying stop and, bad dog for barking, because he's doing a job. He's kind of that protecting. But when I go and acknowledge, and that's the same with people, when people are responding to us in a certain way, it's about, I guess, getting some insight into why they're doing that, and to then acknowledge them.
It's all about that communication, and as long as you're acknowledging that the communication is happening and that you can understand that they're saying something to you, then a lot of the time the problem will start to resolve itself.
Do you know what I did notice this morning, actually, when he was doing that? And we live in a cul-de-sac, and I would have said it's a really quiet street. Do you know what? When you've got a new dog who is highly alert, it is not a quiet street. There is a lot of movement that happens in the street. And I noticed this morning that there was some movement up the street, and he was starting to have a bit of a bark, but he looked at me and I just kind of went, no, there's nothing there. And he sort of was just like, come and, it was almost like he was saying, come and have a look. As soon as I did that and just said, Boston, there's nothing here. He just stopped and then just went to sleep. So is that good? Have I?
Absolutely. It means that he's progressing. So he's starting to look to you for acknowledgement and being like, okay, so I know that you're coming and assessing these things. Whereas, in the previous families, that may not have been happening. So basically what's happening here is you are breaking a habit, and that is fantastic to hear. Yes.
Oh, that's really cool. That's one of the things Dr. Joe Dispenza has a book out called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And he's got some really cool information in there. It's the same concept. It's about what are the things that we no longer want, the habits that we no longer want in our lives, and being really familiar with them so we can actually make that change about what we do want in our lives instead. So that's same.
Absolutely.
People versus animals. Yeah.
I mean, look, we might be more complex in many ways, but there are some things that really just translate almost directly across species.
Yes, yeah. And do you know what else I was reflecting on it as well is being unsure with Boston, because he's got a personality that our other dogs have not had before. And so being unsure of what to do. And what I've learned that you've helped me to learn, Wren, is about being clear about what my expectations are and what the rules are, and being confident in communicating them to him. So when I was kind of a little bit, I'm not sure what to do, I was wishy-washy with my commands. Whereas now that I'm kind of going, okay, these are the things that I need him to do. Even when you talked about, on the walking the other day on the lead, you had said that he's just not even concerned with me. I'm just holding him back, even though he was kind of not polite, but he wasn't
choking himself.
But your observation was that all he sees me is as somebody that's holding him back, that I should be the most important person for him and he should be checking in with me. So when I got insight into that, it was just like, okay, so my commands need to be clearer and not wishy-washy. And I see that a lot. I work a lot with people in leadership roles, and I see it a lot with new leaders. When they're not sure of what to do, they're not confident in communicating their expectations. So the people that they work with then are unsure of what's expected of them.
Yeah.
So that was a very direct, the reflection I could see. I can see that with the people that I coach, and it's just given me maybe just a little different example that I can use with them now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you right now, I've had to develop that confidence as well over time, as everyone does when they step into a role that involves some form of leadership or authority. There is no way that I could be talking to people in the way that I do now about dogs when I first started, like even after the qualifications that I did or anything like that. It is just, you have to have that experience.
Yes. And when you get the experience, then it's kind of like, realizing all the bits you don't know. And then it's about getting people to help you with the bits.
My uncle calls it Mount Stupid, where you sort of start off with,
I love it. Yeah.
I know everything, and then suddenly, oh, hang on a second.
Yes, I actually don't know. Do you know what? I look back on it, even in getting Boston, and I was very conscious about when we were going to get another dog into the family. It's been 18 months since our last dog passed away, and we're very conscious that we didn't want to we just wanted to have a break. And even just looking back in the process of getting Boston, possibly there would be things I would have done differently, but I didn't. So it's about, making that process as smooth as we possibly can for all involved.
Yeah.
What's like the weirdest behaviour you've had to deal with?
Gosh.
And we can protect we don't have to say the dog to protect their identity.
Weirdest behaviour. I'm not actually sure, because most of the time when I'm called in, it's fairly bog standard for me. But it may look weird to other people. So there are some dogs that will just constantly chew on their leashes. There are some dogs who will jump and nip, and it doesn't matter what you do, they'll just keep on doing it. Weird behaviors. I'm trying to think.
That's okay. I was just thinking.
Maybe we'll circle back around to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say Boston straight up.
But Boston, definitely Boston. No.
Are there any behaviours you haven't been able to change? You know how you said sometimes there's, part of the breeding is there been anywhere you've gone, do you know what, I haven't been able to help change the behaviour?
Yeah, so there have been a couple of times, there's very, very few times where I've just flat out said, I can't help you.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we can make some form of improvement through training, and sometimes even combining training and medication together if that's necessary. But there are certain things that we cannot do through behavior modification. So, for example, if you have a dog that is not social, we cannot turn that dog into a social dog.
Yeah.
It is like with humans. If you have an introverted person, you cannot turn them into an extroverted person.
Yeah.
So in that particular instance, we can go, okay, your dog is, for example, reactive on leash.
Yes.
We can get them to the point where they are tolerant of people being in their general vicinity. But there's always going to be the risk that they will overreact if they are over threshold, where they're just not thinking logically anymore. So, you know, there are certain behaviors that we simply cannot fix. There are certain behaviors that we can't make happen. But we can, at the very least, improve it. So with genetics, especially when you've got a dog that has a genetic predisposition to anxiety, and that anxiety has sort of realized itself, that dog's always going to be anxious, pretty much. I can guarantee you that dog is always going to show signs of anxiety in some form. But we can help them to become tolerant of being separated. We can give them management techniques and things like that so that they can calm themselves down. But that dog's always going to have anxiety.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It's not about going in there and being a miracle worker for every situation. It's about assessing the situation and also what's, you know, led to that. And, you know, Boston's 4, we're the third family, so there is some understanding that, yes, there is going to be a readjustment process, but I think he's going to be one of those ones that, you know, has and you know, maybe once he's used to us a bit more. Have you noticed stuff since COVID? Have you been busier with COVID?
Yes.
Has there been a lot of anxiety, separation stuff?
Oh yeah. The amount of dogs that we got brought in for isolation anxiety after COVID lockdown ended was insane, because everybody got their COVID puppies because they were home and they were able to train the dog and take the time, but they didn't necessarily take the time to do separation work where their dog is tolerant of being by themselves and learning how to self-game and be alone. And so as a result, when these people went back to work, their dog suddenly developed that isolation anxiety because the routine was completely changed. So yeah, absolutely. We got called in for a lot of those. The other thing that happens is during the COVID lockdown, dogs couldn't get socialized. So we had a lot of dogs that ended up growing, you know, because obviously it's now been 2 years since COVID sort of began. So now we're getting dogs that are adults and are having issues with being around other dogs because they never actually learned those beginning socialization cues. So then we actually have to manually teach them those. So we use demonstration dogs who have been taught socialization cues or naturally do it to play with them so that they can teach them. And we also use intervention methods so that if we see the play getting a little bit too rough or one dog or the other dog start to become a little bit uncomfortable, then we'll intervene, we'll calm the play down, then we'll reintegrate. So those two things really exploded.
What would be just maybe 1 or 2 tips for the isolation, the separation anxiety that people could do for any of our listeners if they're in that situation? Number 1, call you.
Absolutely. Call me. I'm always enjoying talking to you about isolation anxiety. But one of the biggest things, the really, really biggest thing, more than anything else, is to understand that it is not your fault that your dog has isolation anxiety. That's probably the most important thing, because some dogs you can not give them any separation work at all and they will be completely fine when you leave them alone. Other dogs, because they have that tendency towards anxiety, and that usually tends to be your poodle crosses. So they tend to have that higher level of tendency towards that separation and isolation anxiety. They will then develop the anxiety,
Yes.
because they had that tendency towards it built in.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, just remember that it's not necessarily your fault that your dog has anxiety.
Yeah.
It is just that you happen to have a dog whose tendency towards it has been realized.
Yeah.
So that's the really, really important tip that I think tell everybody.
Because I felt that. I felt that a lot of, even though I rationally knew that it wasn't my fault, there was elements that I thought, oh my gosh, I've created it because, for a whole lot of reasons. But do you want to just give a plug for that book that you referred to me? Because that was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah. So the book that I usually recommend if your dog has isolation or separation anxiety is Julie Naismith's Be Right Back. She is an amazing dog trainer. She specialises in separation and isolation anxiety. That is her main area of expertise. And she basically has written this fantastic book. It is for people who are owners, not for people like me, but I also got a lot out of it. She basically gives you some really, really good information about anxiety in general. Some of the training methods may or may not work with your dog because obviously the difficulty with a one-size-fits-all book is that you're working with living creatures, and so one size does not fit all. But her methods are sound in principle, and you just have to adjust them within that sort of framework of understanding.
And that's what I absolutely found, Wren. You referred that to us, and it was about, what is the baseline for, when does he show some, that stressed behaviour, and then you have then helped to adjust the training to suit our environment, which was really good. So that was really great. And just really quickly, I want to go on and ask you about some other things that sort of fill your cup. But one of that socialising, I've noticed, I've taken Boston to the dog parks a few times with varying degrees of success. But what I've noticed is some dogs are barky dogs, and others play quietly. Barking doesn't always, to me, it's almost like, how some people like to talk a lot and some are more quiet. Is that, I mean, that's, I don't even know what I'm asking there, but
it's a very, very vague answer that I can give you here.
Yeah, because that was a very vague question that I asked.
So the difficulty with barking in general is that it can communicate a wide variety of different things. So when you've got, for example, schnauzers, I'm going to go with schnauzers because they are like the poster child for verbal play.
Sure.
Schnauzers and dachshunds. So basically, some dogs play or instigate play by barking.
Yes.
And so they'll stand in front of a dog that they want to play with and they'll bark and they'll show play language. But other dogs will bark to create space, and it's all about the tone that the bark is in and the body language that the dog is displaying. So usually sort of higher pitch rapid bark is depending on the space. It could mean anxiety or it could mean play.
Sure.
And so, it really, really does depend on the rest of the dog. So I know that my dog is quite vocal when she plays, but hers are all growls. And it can be very funny.
Yeah, okay.
Because she tries to bark through it.
Yes, and my daughter's, so my grand fur baby Mabel, she's a growly player, but she is, so lots of, I guess, just holistic checking it out and just being cautious, I guess, too.
Yeah.
Tell me before we get to the end, what else fills your cup? Because you shared some stuff with me. You are a beautiful, beautiful singer.
Thank you. Yes. So just to preface this, I have ADHD. So, and autism as well, but the ADHD is the main culprit here. I rotate my interests rapidly. So sometimes I'll do woodwork. So I I learned how to restore antique furniture.
Oh my God.
And so I'll do that sometimes. Other
You need to
times
go do
I'll
that
sing.
with John. Like, John's a woodwork teacher. You could go
there you go.
It works with kids with disabilities with hearing.
Sweet.
Anyway, we'll just park that for
awesome.
Yeah.
Later discussion.
Yeah, later discussion. Yes.
So I learned how to restore antique furniture, not anywhere sort of official. It's just literally like Google how to do this. And artwork. I do a lot of drawing, a lot of painting, that sort of stuff when I'm in that mood. Singing, obviously.
Yeah.
I have a lovely friend who is teaching me how to expand my range so I can get a little bit higher, a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And, spending time with my dog, obviously. That's very important.
Yeah.
And writing novels as well.
Oh, wow. So really creative. What I'm hearing there, Wren, is a lot of creativity that you, an outlet for you.
And a lot of stuff with the hands. It's very important.
Yes, interesting. Yeah. So the kinesthetic creativity. And when did you get diagnosed with ADHD? Has that been
2 years ago now? So I'm a late diagnosed baby.
Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 29 now.
29. Yeah. So diagnosed at 27. Did that?
And the autism was a year before.
So what's that meant for you? How's life changed? Has life changed, or has it just kind of?
It has a lot. So the autism diagnosis didn't make much of a difference.
Yeah.
I've never really found that it has impacted my life negatively, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In fact, more than anything, it's actually positively impacted my life because I have special interests.
Yes.
But the ADHD has been the thing that has been a huge impact on my life in a negative sense because of executive dysfunction. So I went through all of my learning years because my special interest was actually learning stuff. I would just absorb everything like a sponge, but I never learned how to study. And so when I hit, year 10, year 11, I realized that A, I wasn't as interested in learning anymore, and B, socializing was way easier. And so my grades went from like A's and B's, wham, down into D's. And
lucky we didn't hang out together. Lucky we didn't hang out together, because I would have been, learning was not my thing either.
Yeah.
But what did you say?
You got depression as a result, and I basically, that was the whole faffing about bit as well, because I was like, maybe I should do this new sparkly thing. Maybe I should do this new sparkly thing. And so, it just got to the point where I was like, I don't know what's going on. Why am I having so much trouble? Even as a business owner, I was still having so much trouble getting myself to do the things that I have to do. And so then I went and I got onto TikTok.
Oh, okay.
And there are a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists who specialize in ADHD who are on TikTok, because that is the platform for people with ADHD.
Serious? Wow.
And it's that constant dopamine hit. It's great.
Yeah, interesting.
But as a result of that, I realized that there were a lot of things that I was like, hang on, I relate to that. And so I went and got an ADHD assessment, and I hit 12 out of the 14.
Yes. And it's quite an involved process, isn't it, to be through that ADHD assessment and things. So what's changed for you now since you've had that kind of?
I went on to medication. So I actually went off my antidepressants, and that was a huge step for me because I've been on them for 6 years.
Yeah, sure.
And the wonderful thing, which I discovered later about SSRIs, is that if you take them when you don't actually have depression, it gives you depression.
That would make sense. Yeah.
So I was basically giving myself depression.
Yes.
So I went off the antidepressants and onto ADHD medication, and for the first time in my life, my brain was quiet.
Wow.
I had never had a quiet brain.
Wow. Yeah.
And suddenly I could prioritize things. Suddenly I could do the things that I didn't actually want to do.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to do them.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that is when my business just took straight off.
And that's different. What I'm hearing there is some things like in my business that I do not want to do and I procrastinate and I faff about. But what I'm hearing from you is that it was really affecting that executive functioning, and that it was almost, and these are my words, not yours, but that debilitating not being able to move through it. But the medication and the diagnosis has really been, because it's a, chemical imbalance in the brain. Yeah.
So, the two things that that people with ADHD don't produce enough of is the dopamine and norepinephrine. And they're both things that provide you with motivation to do the stuff that you need to do.
Yeah.
If you don't have that motivation, you're basically frozen.
Yeah.
You've got paralysis, you've got decision paralysis. And so you just go reach out for the nearest, easiest thing. In my case, it's this little figure. And you start scrolling through TikTok, you start scrolling through social media because that gives you little dopamine hits. And then that just reinforces the fact that you're lying in bed and not doing the stuff that you want to do or that you have to do. And it makes you depressed.
Yeah. Gosh, I get that. And I'm really, we could chat, lots more about that, because I think that could, help a lot of people in just even understanding just that neurodiversity and, people's different approaches to things. And I think also it's a good reminder about not judging, even though we've talked, the beginning of the conversation was about observing behaviours, but it's not about just judging those behaviours. You said it's that holistic approach, and how does it fit with the environment? And when we're, I guess, relating with other people, it's understanding other people and really valuing the diversity that they bring.
Exactly. I mean, I would not be able to do my job half as well if I didn't have ADHD.
Yeah.
Because I can make connections and spring from one thought to the next a lot faster as a result of my neurodivergence.
Yeah.
But it does come with some side effects.
Yeah. And that's been beautiful, Wren. That's been a really insightful conversation around your, being a canine behaviourist, but also about you as a person. What's next for you, Wren? What's next?
Well, I'm in the process of hiring and interviewing new people. We're getting dog walkers and stuff like that in. And I'm in the process of getting a facility for us so that we have a controlled environment to work in.
Oh, wow.
But it's taking a really long time because, ACT zoning laws suck. But so that's kind of what we're working on at the moment. And ideally what I'd love to be able to do is just do the behavior stuff and have sort of other people working the sort of the walks and the obedience work, so then I can start focusing on other things as well. Getting more qualifications and doing more study, and maybe going out and doing some other special interest work as well. So
I love that. I really love that. So growing the business, and so what is the business? Just where can people find you?
So the business is Bowtie Dog Training, as in the little thing you wear around your neck. It is for dogs with manners. So that's it. So our website is bowtiedogtraining.info, or you can catch up with us on Facebook or Instagram if you want to. But that's probably the easiest way to find us.
Yeah, and for those of you that are listening, because the podcast goes out very excitedly around the world. So Wren is here in Canberra with me in Australia, but I'm sure if you wanted to have some advice and a consultation, maybe not or fly.
We do offer video consults.
Okay,
we do offer video consults and consults over the phone. I prefer video consults because then I can see what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a particularly complicated issue, we may refer you on to somebody in your vicinity. just because it's much easier to work with a dog when you have them right in front of you.
Yes. But we got a lot of insight from you, even just with that initial consultation, just learning about things. So, Wren, that has just been an absolutely beautiful conversation. Hugs and happiness to you, and thank you so much.
No worries.
So here we are for a little bit of bonus goodness with Wren, and we were sort of wrapping up the conversation before around ADHD and autism and how that shows up for you. What does a typical day look like for you, Wren? Like, I know that you've got your business, and your day off today, but do you have any sort of...
it really depends on how many clients I have that day, and what time it is. So usually I'll try to get up at about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock to take my girl out for a walk. She's a Kelpie mix, so she needs 2 lots of exercise a day. So I'll try and get up around that time. But the thing that's really helped me probably the most is realizing that as a person with ADHD, I cannot stick to a schedule. So I'm often late. And beg your pardon. And there's a lot of...
Is that a reminder for you?
Yes. Excuse me. Yeah, that's right. It's not important. So basically what I came across, once again, TikTok has been my friend.
Wow.
And I actually came across this thing called phases, or phase scheduling. So instead of saying I have to do this by this time, that sort of thing, unless I have to go out to a client during the day, what I'll do is I have to first thing take the dog out for a walk. But it could be an hour-long walk, or it could be a 10-minute walk. And then the next thing I have to do is eat breakfast. And I don't do anything else until I've eaten breakfast. And then the next thing, and then the next thing. And I found that having that little bit more flexibility has helped a lot. And making some adjustments to things like, if I have to do work, I put on shoes. Why does it work? I don't know. It just does. Because I think it makes...
signals to the body and the mind that that's a different thought process or something, or that you have to be somewhere like...
I don't know what it is, but so that's usually what my mornings consist of is the walk, and then normal morning stuff, and then I'll usually go out to a client, and depending on the session, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, and then I move on with that. Midday, have lunch at some point. And then in the evenings, I am usually, if it's been a really long day, I'm pretty exhausted. I exercise my dog and then I go to bed. But sometimes if it's been a short day, then I'll do some administrative work, or I'll do something that sparks joy. So a little bit of singing or something like that.
That's good to hear, because there's a lot of people that find structure very confining. There's a lot of people that love structure and need the structure, but some find it a little bit confining as well. So it's good to hear. What I'm hearing there is it's about understanding what works for you, and having that flexibility within, a kind of a structure. There are some things that you do need to do at certain times, but not everything has to be at set times during the day.
That's it. The thing that I find that I struggle with the most is to-do lists, because when somebody writes down a single thing like unpack the dishwasher or something like that, it's not just one task for me. It's a million, because I have to stand up, I have to go over to the dishwasher, I have to open the door, I have to, and then every single dish is an extra task because of the way that my mind works. And so it's actually really quite paralyzing sometimes when I'm like, I have to do all of these tasks now. Oh, help.
Wow, that's very insightful.
And so it sounds really, it feels really exhausting sometimes. And that is sort of the biggest reason why I find myself paralyzed in bed or something like that. And even just getting up and getting dressed can be a million tasks.
So how do you then manage that? What works for you? If a to-do list, I get that the to-do list there's all these other tasks embedded into one task.
Yeah.
What works for you then?
Well, what I do, there are a couple of different things that I do. One is curl up into a little ball and cry sometimes.
Yes. Yep.
But the other options, the more healthy options, I will do something like I'll just get up. I won't say I have to do anything else. I just have to get up. And sometimes that can sort of kickstart the momentum.
Yeah.
And then I'll feel a little bit better about it. Or I'll just walk around the house and try and get some dopamine up from the exercise. Sometimes if I realize I've forgotten my medication taking medication will help.
Yeah, I hear that
and standing next to the thing that I have to do, but not actually making myself do the thing, sometimes makes it so that I'm like, okay, it's annoying me enough that I'll do it because I'm already there.
Yeah.
So that's those are some of the things that I do to sort of kickstart my motivation.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work.
No.
I have to understand, I understand that it doesn't always work. This is the wonderful thing about my brain.
Yeah.
But it works more often than not, which allows me to keep functioning as an adult.
Yeah. There's I don't know if you've come across the book, Mel Robbins, it's the 5-second rule. In all honesty, I haven't read the book, but the concept of it is just if you've got to do a thing, count like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it. So what you're actually, it's about just, and I've used that a lot with those things that I procrastinate about, going, I just do not want to put the washing away, and it's just like
my difficulty with that is
do it. Yeah.
I think that my difficulty with that is it's not that I'm procrastinating. I'm not just going, I don't want to. It's literally like, so the way that I had it described to me, executive dysfunction, is having, these rows of people and they're passing balls between each other. And then you have a ball in your hand and there is a sheet of glass in between you and me. And you're saying, take the ball. And I'm saying, I can't. There's a sheet of glass there. I cannot take it. And that is the disconnect. That's where the issue occurs. And it's those messages just not getting from one neuron to the next, that your neurotransmitters are not firing properly.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
very different. That's very different to the procrastination of just couldn't be,
couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
It's not laziness. And this is something that I had to deal with pretty much my whole life, which was
imagine. Yeah.
She's not applying herself. She's being lazy. And it wasn't laziness. I could do it, but I couldn't.
No, because what people are seeing are the observable, or the action is that you're not doing something. So they're putting judgment on it that you are lazy or not applying yourself. And I see that a lot with people about, just judging others according to
your own capability.
Capability and rules. And I think we have to be very, very mindful that we're not doing that. And it's, sometimes we do, of course, but it's about just trying to get a great
we have a certain amount of personal experience that works really well with other people's external experiences, but there are some things that just don't translate.
What do you you're very open about ADHD. A lot of other people may not be open about their stuff.
Yeah.
What are some what do you like? Again, this is a really vague question. Sorry.
Okay.
You're okay with talking about it and sharing with people what works for you. What advice would you have for others that might not
feel so comfortable?
Yeah, thank you.
So the thing is that everybody is different, and not everyone's going to be comfortable talking about it. Yeah. I find that it's much easier to get the conversation out of the way and just go, I have this thing, I'm weird, ta-da. But not everyone's going to have that confidence.
No.
And so basically the best thing that I can tell you right now is that when you are an ADHD person or an autistic person,
Yeah.
and you start to mask, which is where you're sort of concealing
Yes.
your ADHD or your autism traits,
Yeah.
it adds a level of stress to your life that is technically unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, you're constantly putting on this facade.
Yes.
And it becomes a habit.
Yes.
And so I was actually, for a little while, I was actually looking into unmasking, which is essentially going, I don't want to pretend.
Yeah, perfect. Love it.
Anymore. I want to just be who I am, and doesn't matter about everybody else. So what I've done is I've translated, so I stim a lot with my hands, and I've turned it into talking with my hands instead. So you will notice that I do a lot of this sort of gesture stuff while I'm talking, but it's acceptable.
Yes.
Because of the way that I've been able to redirect it. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is eye contact. I've had to teach myself how to give people eye contact because I'm not very good at it. So what I'll do is I will pretend like my eyes are following my hands if I feel uncomfortable still looking at somebody's eyes. And so that gives me a break.
Yes.
Where I don't have to give that eye contact anymore because I find it really, really confronting.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't have to do something like stare at their mouth because that makes people very uncomfortable sometimes. Or stare over their left ear, you know, something like that. So I'll give myself breaks regularly just by doing this sort of thing and doing this and, you know, basically being more animated than necessary so that I can give myself time to calm down.
Wow.
So that's essentially how I do it.
Have you discovered that yourself? Like to me, that's
I did not
self-awareness.
come across that anywhere else. This is just how I have developed it as I've started to go, okay, this is who I am. I don't have to worry about you know, the judgment from other people, especially as it's become a lot more sort of socially accepted to have neurodivergence in general. So I don't have to worry about masking it. I don't have to conceal my special interests. The thing is also that my particular form of ADHD and autism is relatively quote unquote socially acceptable. So I can still chameleon myself and look relatively neurotypical in most situations, whereas other people may not be able to do that.
Yes, and it's all very different, isn't it, and how it shows up. And like we were talking about the dogs before, you know, just the, you know, the background and the environment. And when you talked about the masking and just being really comfortable being yourself, that is my message and my wish for everyone, regardless of what's going on for them, is to just show up as they are, because it is very, very tiring to pretend to be something that you're not, and trying to impress people, you know, regardless of you know, what it is that's the trigger for it. But it's very, very tiring, and to be pretending or comparing or showing up a certain way because you think that's how you should show up, when we are comfortable and confident to be ourselves, that's when we get that freedom. That's when we absolutely get that freedom. And it's not, you know, it's not always easy to, you know, to just be yourself, but sometimes it is incredibly easy just to be yourself.
I am very lucky in that I'm in a privileged position where I can be myself.
Yes.
It's not always possible. So
yeah.
Unfortunately, any advice that I can give with that.
And you know what? I think just by sharing your story, and that's what the chats are about, is just how women do life. And, you know, at various ages, all the people that I'm chatting with are at, you know, different journeys, different stages of life. And I think by sharing your story, there will be people who are listening that will just be the pearl of wisdom that they need to hear today. So thank you very much. I just love this, Wren, and I look forward to our next catch up. Thank you.
No worries.
All right, see you, doll. Bye.
Bye.